I was going to say that's good not to record because, okay, go
Well,
ahead.
so the recording is now started. This is Theo with the Collaborative Change Library, and as David just said, a somewhat exclusive, though not excluding, group of folks that we're here with this morning as Collaborative Change authors. And yeah, we're just sort of getting started checking in, and Carol was sharing that she's been up since 5 this morning.
On Zoom.
But I've rarely been as both energized and in a reflective mood. And since you asked me directly, Teo, what's going on, I thought it was an invitation, unless it was supposed to be just, I'm fine. But in this group, that's really not the way we operate. So the short reflection is that I am deeply inspired and reflective of this meeting with a group of action researchers who have been doing action research. The longest term one is Bill Torbert, who's been 50 years. And the state of action research, and particularly at the Academy, because that's the topic that my little group was working on. And the part that was most significant, and it came from nowhere, is a woman who is concerned about the Academy and that we all talk to each other. And what about the public good? And I'll stop there. I mean, I haven't heard anybody outside BGSU talk about universities and curriculum development really for the good of the public. And the integration of collaborative learning and collaborative methods and action research as a valid methodology, which is really what each of us individually and collectively is engaged in. And I left and I hit the button and you're here. I mean, well, and I could debrief to the point where I am right now because Teo said, "What's up?" That's not how you usually start these meetings. I mean, I think there's some synchronicity going on, and maybe Tennyson, you want to write a poem?
Maybe. Well, I'll pick up. Are you complete enough there, Carol?
I am more than complete.
Okay. So I'll pick up with the things that stir and arise just because we've started talking today. If I start with some of what you were sharing in the action research realm of things and universities and relationships, I do think of a couple of people that I've been working with for a while. Well, actually, one is new and the other has been over the last 4 or 5 years in university settings. One of those is the University of Texas at Arlington, and they have a president there, Jennifer Cowley, for the last 2 years that has really tried to bring a participative leadership model to what was a very pretty authoritative context. And my colleagues, Chris Corrigan and myself and Caitlin Frost, we've been able to do 3 or 4 different, multi-day gatherings now that are really for their faculty and for their leadership. But of course, in doing those, there's a way that trickles out into the classroom, it trickles out into governance, it trickles out into their values of how do we engage alumni, how do we engage community. So that one, and then the newer one that's starting is a university in Edmonton, Alberta, which is where I'm from originally, but it's called MacEwan University. And they've also invited kind of a leadership cohort program. That might not be as direct as some of the things you're talking about, Carol, but I like to see these pockets arising where the instinct is more collaboration, not less, or more participation, not less, and all of the things that go with that. That reminds me of something that my good friend, mentor, just wrote. Actually, Meg Wheatley is who I'm talking about. She's a 30-year friendship, but she talks about, I'm trying to find the book now on my shelf over here, but it's Restoring Sanity is the name of the book. And then there's, yeah, there it is. And so the subtitle on there is about something about creating pockets, right? Meg and I have had that conversation many times. It's like some of us want the complete whole scale stuff and we put our efforts into that. And some of us are just trying to sustain little pockets that are about the kind of things we're talking about. In my world of the art of hosting, there is a simple little framing model that has just lasted over the years in my need for clarity. Because it defines a lot of like, what are we trying to do in this group, or what are we trying to do in this gathering or this academic association? And it's just about learning. And I find I both need and want and find value in sharing this little learning narrative. And it's 3 stages. Like the first job is to become a learner. Of course, that's what we're trying to do. And then if we're lucky, and maybe support some practice with one another, become a community of learners. And I think that's where a lot of us end up landing. The kicker beyond that to me is become a community that learns. And that one's got a little bit more like ecosystem intelligence in it to me. Those are all things that I get excited about. So I'm playing off of what we've both recorded and not recorded here this morning. That's my excitement and hello. Hi, folks.
That's great. Since we're raising books for conversation, the title of this book is Managing Organizations That Learn. And this was an aspiration that I and my co-editor, co-author Steve Cavallari had in 1996. That, and Carol and I first connected around the fact that we were believers in organizations that learn, not just organizational learning, that learn, which I love that you put at the top of your aspirational list, because that part is action. And so the question is, well, when did you learn that? And now, you can go to the evidence and you can go to what was behind it and what it led to. Otherwise, it's amorphous. You say, well, yeah, I learn. Yeah, we learn in this organization. But when you get to that, and that's why we worked hard to keep that word in. Our Blackwell was the publisher of the series and located in Oxford, I believe, or Cambridge, one of those 2 snooty schools. And they didn't initially like that title. They said, it's not really good. Is it grammatical? Can you imagine some British guy asking, is it grammatical? And we said, yes. This is our title, and we fought for it. But anyway, I love that. I think we don't need to give up on that part yet. But the pockets part, yeah. In a way, even though there are a few of us today than last month, we're kind of a pocket, aren't we? Pocket full of miracles.
Oh, that's,
Celebrate the pockets.
I can't help but piggyback what you said, Tennyson, about Meg. I would not call her a 30-year friend in the sense that you do, but I've known her since that long.
Cool.
And I remember her saying, it was when she first wrote Leadership in the New Science that she came to a Society for Organizational Learning and Corporate Learning conference. And I've known her since. And I remember she was so shocking to me because she stood there and she said, I got on this road thinking I was going to change the world. And she was an educator who went to the Peace Corps. I mean, that's what people in our era did, who were activists and cared about things. And here she was all these years later. It was actually when she began to write Who Do You Choose to Be, I think, when this realization came. And she said, I realize I can't change the world. I have to look for what is important and what I can do. And that's when Warriors of the Human Spirit began. And Warriors of the Human Spirit was encouraging each of us to find out what our little space was, not the whole world. And that's the foundation for this Islands of Sanity. So isn't that interesting how it's sort of come full circle? You're talking about changing organizations, the whole organization, right? And then we look at it and we say, well, in reality, that's not what we can do. And how is this person who's the president of the university, Tennyson, looking at that in the context that you're presenting it, from one little step at a time versus her view of the whole organization?
Yeah, I'll just say a little bit, and then I'm wanting to welcome all of our voices here also. But with the, I think there's something admirable and demonstrative that comes from the personally known experience and encounter that is this university. I think they're doing something bold and audacious, daring to focus on 3 or 4 central, clear values, and then create a more communal aspect around that. Like most of us are just trying to work some pretty simple values, but dare to practice it at scale. And sometimes we're looking for plans, and sometimes we're looking for, I think, just further embodying of those values, or even interrupting some of the old shitty values. So when we're able to do that, then some amazing things happen. And, maybe it's not the fulfillment of a plan in the way that many of us would like it to be, but there is something bold and audacious and deeply loving, I think, about trying to live a value system in these large, complex organizations, including academia, that we find ourselves in. It's impressive to see humans that want to do good that way and follow that instinct.
So let's finish the check-in and then come back to that.
Great.
Lisa, go.
Oh, it's okay. You can jump in. There's a couple things there, I guess, that resonate with the timing. Saturday was officially my start of my 26th year at my company. So I hit 25 years on Friday.
Right.
So obviously that means you reflect, right? on where you are, where you want to be, and that kind of thing. And I think to confirm Dave's comment, this is a pocket for me because in the new role that I've been in almost 2 years, I get pulled right into the tactical all the time, the getting the work done, blah, 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 blah. So this pulls me back to some strategy and like what really makes me tick and all of that kind of thing. So I think this pocket helps me go create my own pockets because I can't necessarily like take on the world. And that could be frustrating in my overall, like, where am I at in this point, after 25 years, because I don't feel like it's been that long. So,
I didn't know they hired 10-year-olds back then.
Yeah,
you go from the crib.
I always appreciate those kind of comments because I get it from my ATD folks too. So at any rate, there's that, and then I guess so I can finally hold something up because I haven't authored anything. But I just remembered and reached over, and this is like an ATD thing. I don't know if you can see it, but it's from 2016, and they did a study on learning cultures in organizations.
Oh, building
So
a
it's
culture
a
of
bit
learning.
old. Yeah. And so it just hit me that, I think this might have been some of the origins of how or where I wanted to do my master's, like, or in what. And it just talked about how if the organization has a culture of learning, like, they're like three likely to like use that in recruiting and to attract folks, that they're three times more likely also to hold leaders accountable for learning importance, and top performers are 5 times more likely to be part of organizations that have a learning culture. So even that long ago, and I gotta believe it just increased from there, and that was where I got, I guess the start of really wanting to look at organizational change and stuff like that. So now I can't say too much about how it connects back to the academia. I think that there's people like yourself that can give more advice there, but it does interest me because I think there's so much knowledge there that doesn't filter out well outside of the graduates that are coming out. So if those persons don't pick up a torch, then what are some of the other ways to create pockets? So I'll kind of leave it there.
That's wonderful. That's amazing.
Mm.
I just
I'm really
noticed.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave. No, I just noticed that it's not a pocket unless it's attached to something, right? Yeah, see? Okay. And so
Mm.
your pocket within your company, Lisa, it is attached to the whole. It's just a place on the whole where you can gather a few things that you particularly don't want to lose. And I will tease you to say, of course, you're in IT, so that's where you put your pocket protector, right? The old stereotype.
My
of the
employees do. I got to get close to them more.
They
So,
still have
anyway, go
pocket
ahead.
protectors? Well, we got to work on that analogy as well. But the other part that goes along with the last book I held up, which is, it just struck me that 1996 was when I was working very hard on the management of organizations that learn. And I did an interview. I did about 12 interviews that were interspersed between the chapter or the essays, one of which was with Peter Vail. And it was a great interview. And at that very time, 1995, 96, he was writing Learning as a Way of Being. And it meant a lot to him. I mean, the first book he wrote, Managing as a Performing Art, was about action and what managers do. And managers need to learn how to run a company. I mean, it was action, action, action for Peter. This one, however, is not, however, it is about action. It's about learning as action, not just in action, but experiencing the learning as you're doing it and becoming sensitized to that, learning as action. So we get this stereotype, which he addressed, where we think that you're only in a school or a university college is where you learn. That's the activity of learning, because it's all structured, laid out, and assessed. That horrible word at ACSB stuck into our lives. And after that, as you say, you go out into the world. Where's the learning out here? Where's the system for learning? Where's the structure for learning? Well, it is a lot of places, including your company. And your technology affords people the opportunity to learn constantly. But we've still got to go back to this notion that, and thank you, Tennyson, for getting this started, because we don't stop being a learner ever. And that's why I think Carol and I are, we could have hung up our cleats, right? Quite a while ago. And here we are, still at it at 80, in my case, 81. Carol's much younger.
Yeah, it's
So,
a definition of much.
so learning.
I'll share with you two nuggets. I think that's fair. That have jumped into my head as you all were speaking. One is from the work that I used to do that my wife still does, working with people with developmental disabilities. I've had a chance here and there as a consultant to support agencies that try to close the learning gap for people with disabilities, that try to close the gap in how does somebody who is not neurotypical get access to the workforce and so forth. And there is a struggle with sometimes well-intended but missing the mark sort of efforts from regulatory agencies, for example, that say the key to all of this is community engagement. And so community in those circles for private providers that look to provide services to individuals to enable them to find a better job, go to school or go back to school, or find appropriate schooling versus maybe where they were placed and so forth. For them, community is almost a swear word sometimes, because it's like, oh, this is this mandate that you have that sometimes feels like it's actually making it harder for me to find the right solution for Teo getting the most out of what Teo can do. And so somebody apparently in a presentation, somebody shared this with me, said, can we just stop talking about community and start talking about relationships? And I was like, that would probably be helpful if we framed community in that way and were more clear about what keeps coming back to me is this idea of fractals. In my residency this past weekend, Deb O'Neill, who teaches in our graduate OD programs, brought in her friend and mentor Richard Boyatzis, and he was making sort of continued reference around how he sees his intentional change theory really as something that is fractal. And then I start thinking about broccoli, right? How the little piece of broccoli, if doesn't matter how big you go, they sort of all look the same. But at the core of it is a conversation between two or more people that is only meaningful if there is a framing of what is that relationship. It doesn't have to mean we have to be best friends, or we don't have to be married. We don't have to live in the same neighborhood, but we have to have some context for what is our relationship in this to make the change something meaningful and sustainable. And then the other thing that showed up sort of right next to that, and sort of particularly bubbled up, Lisa, when you spoke about the pockets and the torches, I had a very intense exchange with a dear friend via a Google Doc, where she was asking me for feedback, and I'm just going to read to you a portion of this because I think it connects here for where we all are. And I'm going to intentionally leave the context out for a second. For the bulk of my career, I've made it a conscious choice to not have a thematic. I'm not an activist. Instead, I have chosen to use my methodologies and frameworks to get behind and support others to strengthen the impact they have on the issues they care about. I'm not trying to make people care about what I care about or believe what I believe. I believe there's beauty in diversity. I believe there's beauty in each of us bringing our unique brilliance and improving the issues that matter most to us. There are so many challenges in our world. We need people to be passionate about different things. I also know from my academic practice and my lived experience that words matter. How we behave, what we support, and when we are silent has an impact. I don't want to push a specific issue, but want to be clear about the fact that I come from a place of acceptance, inclusivity, love, and expansiveness. beauty is one of my core values, one of the truths that I come back to time and again, and it is in the way that John O'Donohue describes beauty as the opposite of all forms of fundamentalism. So you will see me drawing a line in the sand and making clear that hate is not acceptable. The language and words we choose are impactful. It really struck me that she was wrestling with, how do I take a stand on a topic when I've been so careful for so long to not just be known for, you know, being an activist and this or that and the other. The larger context is, this post is about taking sides with both Palestinians and Israelis and asking for a ceasefire. But she was really wrestling with, it's Bessie, Dave, by the way. Dave knows who, somebody else that he had on his podcast. So I'm struck sometimes with, like, what is the torch that I want to light and wave? Or what's the pocket that I want to be present in? And or do I sometimes choose to not name that and say, here's, like, I want to be somebody that's known for bringing conversation, bringing learning into the context that I'm part of, regardless of what that learning is about. Feels like a balancing act sometimes.
Sure is. The person I featured this week is a young woman living in Berlin, born Dutch, and consulting in something she calls the Happiness Podcast, among other things. Her name is Elisa Tundu. Anyway, here's my point. When I selected a clip to feature, this week's episode, she said, I don't go into an organization and tell them what to do. And until they know what they need, I really don't have a role. And I think Tennyson taught me that in our conversation back when he was on my podcast. They've got to reach a point where their need is felt so deeply that they'll say, oh, all right, I'll listen. Oh, all right, I'll talk to that person over there who I never particularly liked in the first place. All of that. They've got to feel that need. And I surmise or conjecture that school in Texas, I cannot imagine a more embattled system of higher education than Texas right now.
Yeah.
Where you can barely draw a breath without being worried that you're gonna, lose your job if you're a professor.
Florida.
Yeah, they're competing.
Florida.
They're competing.
They're trying to one up each other. Yeah.
The poor guy is a guy who left a job in Texas and went to Florida thinking that he might have a better shake. But my point is that the need now, my guess is, for that faculty is that school in Arlington. They're finally feeling it for the whole institution, not they're just a little sub-pocket within a sub-pocket within a sub-pocket, which we call academic departments. You cannot get more protected than that, than sticking yourself in one of those little apartments when everyone puts up the barriers and then fights for your tenure. It meant that we had, in my case, 1,500 professors on my small campus, on my small institution, 1,500. And maybe 100 in my school. And over the 30 years I was there, the only reason I ever had to talk to a philosopher or an English professor or an elementary educator was if I was on a committee. I had no other authorization to move freely around that school. Yet everything I did as an activist, and I was, had so much relevance to every aspect of everything we taught in that institution that it was overwhelming how connected everything was. And a few times I got to a point where people kind of understood that, but I left it at 73, wishing deeply that I could have had more impact. And here we are right now, and I've got a friend, Tennyson, who's having impact, and you guys are having impact. Carol's having impact, and now Bridget is having impact. You know, what an interesting group that came together in the Collaborative Change Library. The dusty old Collaborative Change Library. I'm done with my speech.
Hello, dear Birgit. We just sort of jumped in from a check-in into just sharing and letting it evolve and flow. Carol, I asked Carol what's up, and then she said, do you really mean that? Do you want to know? And so that's where we've gotten to, thinking about things like BGSU. Actually, BGSU would be very happy to hear that we're talking about their mission and vision statement being a university for the public good. But what does that mean? How does that show up? What are the pockets that we're in? What are the porches that we're trying to light, or choosing not to light in order to not then be called somebody that's my stuff, and not then be called somebody who's just known for that one torch. So an invitation for you to jump in if you'd like, or whoever has something they want to reflect back.
Follow it. Hey, what's up, Birgit?
That works.
It's great to see you all. There's a lot that's up, and one of the things that we do, we have, instead of a community of practice, like from that which I work in, Genuine Contact, we actually, the group over time established an organization.
Oh, she clicked. She zigged and zagged.
That's all Bridget wanted to say.
Way to drop the mic. Now leave.
We're hanging on that last word.
I know,
What
there
she's
you go.
gonna say next.
Organization.
A lot of things are up. I know that. I heard that part.
Hopefully she'll be right back.
You know what? I'll tell you, even a minute
cl-
of Bridget, she always makes me feel better. Something about her spirit. I mean, it's Birgit, and so a minute of Birgit was good. Hopefully she'll get back. Lisa, can you help her?
I see her, I'll let her in.
Well, when she
but
comes straight, whoops, go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, she just always leaves you wanting more, right?
Yes,
She just
exactly.
exited. Go ahead.
I just like the phrase, like if we're weaving our conversation here, Dave, you spoke about some of your approach of, moving freely about to be in learning, or even creating some excuses, whether they be a committee or something else, to interact with these folks that you don't normally interact with. I like the phrase authorized to move freely. And I like the thought that says, well, why would we do something like that? That's anarchy, that's chaos, is it not? The moving freely, I think, is what reveals some of this systemic wisdom. So what would happen, oh my gosh, if in whatever language we use in whatever process, we're able to welcome the operating principle that is, oh, you are authorized to move freely here. You are authorized to learn. You are authorized. If we need authorization, then let's just call it out loud, so that we can be in all of this intelligence together and kindness.
Yeah.
It's like that's a different operating mode than what came out of industrialization.
Very different.
Back.
Great words.
Yeah.
Birgit, what's up? You're on
Take
mute.
two.
Now I'm on mute. First I'm unplugged, then I'm on mute. I'm having too good a time here.
What a day.
Anyway, our organization, every year we have an online open space technology meeting, and we're in the midst of that, and we're having a blast. And it's so energizing to be with people from all these countries and hear their perspectives, and it just always helps to get kind of unstuck from anything that might be kind of in more stuck places. So I'm having this wonderful time with all of that. And I guess that's just from a we can do it, frame of mind. It's like, let's go lightly throughout the earth and see what happens. And it might be a different way of advocacy, but it's what I've learned over time. I used to, in my advocacy, really be in fight mode. And then I developed the gift of storytelling mode and made much more progress. I mean, I have filled City Hall with, disadvantaged people. I've done all those things. And now I'm much more in this light, like very light mode, touch things lightly. That's it for me. Thanks for letting me speak.
That's a great phrase, touch things lightly. Yeah. Having the light touch. My gestalt about anyone I've met since I started knowing Carol and Deo and Steve, when they invited me to bring Peter's last book into the My Library, I've always felt that by and large, everyone I've met has the light touch. And it may be instinct and maybe our conditioning, but I rarely hear anyone who says, I've got this methodology and I'm going to bring it in and damn it, you're going to learn it. We go almost the other way. And so we actually are the greatest risk takers when it comes to stepping into campuses or other places you guys go, or even staying in a company as long as you have 26 years. Lisa's been at this company. If you keep trying to force your own opinion, there it is, your own opinion and your own my way or the highway, it's not our group. But there is a lot of that going on right now in this country. In fact, an absolute maniac is running around calling for things like jailing Hillary Clinton. And we laugh, but it's serious. I mean, so it's a weird contrast we're living in right now. We who have the greatest love for people and the greatest belief that in open space they can come up with the best solutions that they'll enact, is this other force that's coming along and just pounding our institutions, pounding our justice system. So it's a tough time to be not an activist. But if you become an activist, it's how. Now, real quick, I have to bring this up. I had a really great hour and a half on the Prometheus Voices session yesterday. And it was a very small group, and it was Barbara Kellerman. Barbara Kellerman, who's been around a long while. Thank you, Theo. She's kind of our contemporary, and she's written book after book, article after article around what now becomes her latest book, which is Bad Leaders Become Worse. And we let them, and we let it happen. And it wasn't just focused on Trump. She's done a tremendous amount of history research to point out that every time a tyrant arises, they become worse people on an hourly basis. And so our question when we were finally talking with Barbara directly was, what can we do? And she said, I don't know, but I've never been more worried. So I didn't mean to bring the group down here, but it is kind of interesting that all of this is going on.
I would like to say, I have zero interest in a political discussion in this forum. I've got much more interest in ourselves and our different ideas about change. And something I pay and have all my life paid a lot of attention to is mythology and story. And one of the mythologies that's on the planet, I'm not talking about any specific leaders, but there is a mythology that is still the mythology that is people can come together. People in organizations have very strong opinions about leaders. And so a leader becomes either a hero or a villain. I'm oversimplifying. And I think it's really important for people who are about change and bringing about change, and especially collaborative change, to divorce ourselves from that mythology and to not villainize anyone. Everyone has their role, their soul has a role, and whatever we might think of those roles exist. So we are in this precious occupation of committing ourselves to bring about positive change. So I, for myself, feel that it's really important for me to stay really balanced, to look at mythology, to not buy into it, and to offer something different, just by way of how people interact with one another. So I suggest we take care about I just think we have a precious role. We ought to stick with that.
I agree.
So my thoughts there, Birgit and Dave, would be that for you, for what you were saying, Dave, that there's just forces that are, you know, like pushing people towards the poles, I guess I would say. And so to what Birgit's saying is that I really feel like I try to be the person pulling back and saying, you know, like if we've got to go through change together, you've got to be able to listen. You've got to be able to, you know what I mean? Like, don't let it get you further to the ends of the spectrum. And I think that's to tie back to our pockets discussion, like part of the pocket I'm trying to create. It doesn't matter what the topic is, just that someone's more receptive to whatever it is, because I come from a very small town, and it's not that, you know, the people are closed-minded. It's like they want simplicity and not have things that they don't care about even inflicted on them. So again, when I'm there and I find myself very different from them, but I came from there, I'm really just wanting to create an environment that they listen. You know, and that's like my little pocket, because I don't think I've talked about where I'm from, but like way up, we do this in Michigan, right? I grew up here, one blinking light town, and now I live in one of the most liberal cities in the state, in Ann Arbor. So being here, I'm say defending my home, and when I'm in my home, I'm defending where I live to a degree. Right. So anyway, that was just what was coming to mind. Acknowledge what Dave's talking about. Yeah, like just acknowledge what Dave's example is, but want to live where Birgit's talking about. So.
Yeah.
As I keep listening here, I'm moved by bits of phrases that we each share. Divorce from the mythology is an example, Birgit. Because these sort of, I feel like they kind of ping intuitions, inner intuitions. And I like the feeling of being pinged that way. I know that many of us work on some different layers here. And for me, it will always be interesting, always has been and always will be, some of the broadest meta stories that we dare name in the company of very specific gatherings. You know, that I would loop back into where we started. It's like, well, maybe we're just trying to create fields of learning here. And immediately I can find the 10 subtitles of that I want to name on top of that, you know, great fields of connection, lots of things. So I mean, maybe this is one of the challenges of being human now, is
Mm.
that some of us are trying to reclaim the bigger stories, the meta stories, the human purpose stories, the human spirit stories, the living systems stories. And then we also do that in the day-to-day, like here's a workshop. I'm thinking of the workshop, one of the workshops that I have coming up. Well, it's really a 2-day conference, but it's with a group of folks who are not accustomed to this participative way of being. And part of that design is that we're going to spend a chunk of it in open space on the second day after we've created a little bit of a relational field. And this is a hybrid kind of conference, by the way. These are people who are used to delivery of information and yet have the instinct to do something different. And that means it's a gutsy choice, right? So we're talking about open space, and it's interesting. So I'm trying to pull it down now for me to, and here's a group to work with. Because on the one hand, the thing they're most nervous about and fumbling with is, how do we tell people about open space? How do we tell them that there's not going to be an agenda when they're used to selling programs because of the heroic leader deliverer of information? We're going to create the agenda while we're together. That's the thing they're most nervous about and most excited about.
Yeah.
And so I think some of us come along and try to hold enough of an invitation to say, let's give this a go and try to anchor it in a narrative that can land in their system also. These are medical professionals for this particular one. And so I keep steering to this language of, look, it's a learning gathering. And we have choices about how we go about our learning together. And sometimes we need delivery of information so we can sit and listen to it. And sometimes we need to talk to our peers, and we need to be curious with our peers. So some of us come along, I feel this for this one, is in the simple design, simple agenda of 2 days together. Gosh, holding the value of this, but giving it a shape of this. And I feel like part of the challenge for me, part of the invitation in that for me also, is to love these people into a learning process that they crave, but they don't yet know, or they've forgotten. That's part of the divorcing from mythologies, or the debunking from all the deeply imposed truths of how gatherings are supposed to happen. I think a lot of us are about restoring that in the world.
Man.
I want to go back. I wish we could go back to the tape right now, where you spoke at the very end, Birgit, with one of your wonderful smiles, and said, I can only do that now at this point in my life. And I'm so interested in understanding what's happened, or do you know what's happened that it's okay now and it didn't happen earlier? Is that a precondition that we have to have had enough life to be able to do that?
No, it's the era that I happen to be born into. I think that had an effect because I watch my teenage grandchildren. They're fully capable. they get
That's what I wanted to know.
They're and part of that is the kind of family they were raised in. I'm sure that has affected their viewpoints. But I don't think age has anything to do with it. I don't think needing to have lots of experience has anything to do with it.
Do you know what it has to do with? How does one help people to get that?
Give lots of space. I mean, my
I got it.
my children, for example, they started attending. Like my oldest, her first open space technology meeting was when she was 14, and it happened to be like in a city, and I happened to know the mayor and so on and so forth. And as these different people, because she posted a topic, she got it, and then and she was like kind of a bit of a, like a little bit of a wild teenager, but she posted a topic and it happened to attract people like the mayor and others. And she led the topic. She followed the simple instructions. She got it. And then had an experience of these people actually listening to what she had to say, which was really a phenomenal breakthrough of being listened to. And then I laughed because I was out in the lobby, and as these people came out of the room where she was leading something, the mayor looked at me and said, "Your daughter, right?" Like they were like kind of like a bit chagrined because they were facing some truths from a teenage viewpoint. And so that would be one answer, is to give them space and to listen, and to make that a normal part of upbringing and education and so on.
Thank you. That was a gift.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
What final thoughts do we have? It looks like we got three minutes till we close out.
My final thought is, in a checkout kind of way, is thanks for stirring this. I think I come to these calls to be stirred a little bit. And sometimes I come with a thought or an idea, but most of it is just showing up to say, oh, who's in the room? And I bet we'll stir something. I take that as a gift. Thanks for this morning.
Ditto.
Me too. I always come away with something, and it just, inspires for what I need to do next and so on. And in my own next step, in 2 weeks, I'm heading to the Netherlands, and there's a 5-day deep dive, but it's going to be fun in holistic organizational development. We've got people from a number of countries, and we're going to have a blast. And
Ooh.
my biggest concern, because it's so free and open, is, and we're in some forest, is I'm going to say, okay, go to your breakout spaces. And they'll, of course, go off into the forest. And my biggest concern, and I say this tongue in cheek with laughter, is they won't come back because they're having too much fun learning. That's it for me.
Oh, that's a beautiful image. Ask them to take pictures, please.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for hosting so graciously.
Let me
And
throw out the
sharing
last minute.
this part
Let me throw out the last minute because I watched the ceremony at Normandy this morning. And if you haven't watched it, watch the replay. It was amazing. And there were mostly men who were well over 100 who were there being honored by this moment. But one phrase, and it maybe goes with what we're all about. The word was, if we stop talking about them, we won't remember them. So something as powerful as talking about the people who were or the people who are, to keep them in remembrance when they're no longer present, is so fundamental to this entire ceremony. It was, we want to talk about these people so they're not forgotten. So that's my last word for the session. I'll see you in July.
Well, thank you all for being here. And again, that you guys just keep pulling me back to where I prefer to be, even outside of my tactical work. So
I got you in my
have-
pocket. I got you in my pocket.
Yeah.
Congrats on 25 years, Lisa. That's big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you. Thank
fantastic.
you. I appreciate
Safe
it. Have a
travels.
good,
Bye, guys.
see ya.
Bye.
Have a good day.